Hey everybody, Damien from Bay Ridge DIY here. This week's wood of choice is going to be rustic hickory. Rustic hickory is a really good wood to work with. Looks really nice when you're done. It's got a lot of brights, a lot of darks in it, kind of a medium reddish brown color. We're going to be building a small bathroom vanity. It's going to be a really easy DIY project. You could probably bust it out in a day or two with finishing and making your own doors. Stick around, I'll show you how we do it.
To build this vanity, I'm using 4/4 rustic hickory. We start at the planer. We plane it down to 13/16 of an inch. This will give us a little bit of room for sanding. Once I have it down to 13/16, I bring it over to the miter station. I cut the rough lengths for the face frame. My next step is to rip the board down to 2-inch strips. This is the thickness I've chose for my face frame. I have all my boards at a rough length. To make sure each end is square, I bring them over to the table saw and square one end, and then I cut them down to the final length. Once everything is cut down to length, I bring my rails over to the Craig Foreman and put pocket holes in both ends. I will say, the Craig Foreman was a great investment for my shop. It makes quick work of putting pocket holes in any material. Once all the pocket holes are drilled, it's time to glue the stiles and the rails of the face frame together. I use my right angle clamp and my face clamp to clamp down the face frame, just to make sure nothing moves when I'm shooting in the first screw. The next rail that has to go in place is the bottom rail for my false drawer. I use the same technique in screwing this to the stile. The final rail to go in will be my bottom rail. I plan on running my face frame all the way to the ground, so this will sit up about 4 inches. For my side panels, I'm going to use some 3/4 inch MDF rustic hickory. I cut 2 pieces from the sheet, 32 inches by 18 inches for my side panels. Back at the Craig Foreman, I put pocket holes every 6 inches on the front side of each panel. With some of the scrap material left over, I'll make my toe kicks and my shelf supports. I cut this down to 5¼ inches at the table saw. Using my miter gauge, I then cut 2 pieces down to 16½ inches. One for the toe kick and one for the back shelf support. Once again, the Craig Foreman makes short work of putting pocket holes in each end of these pieces. I attach the back shelf support with a little bit of glue and 3 1-inch pocket screws. To attach the face frame to the side panels, I laid down a piece of 1/8 inch plywood to give me an 1/8 inch overhang on the end of my cabinet. I then use a couple clamps, some glue, and some 1-inch pocket screws to hold the face frame to the panel. With some scrap pieces of rustic hickory MDF, I cut at 45° angles on each end. I used some Star Bond and some accelerator to glue these to the front for my sweep. It adds a really nice look and makes it easier for cleaning out underneath the cabinets. To make my countertop supports, I find a couple pieces of 2-inch scrap hickory lumber. I use the Craig Foreman to put some pocket holes in them and screw them to the top of the cabinet on the inside. While I'm doing this, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on Instagram at Bay Ridge DIY and check out our IGTV videos. For my bottom shelf, I cut down a piece of 3/4 inch maple to the inside dimension of my vanity. I use the clamp-on pocket hole jig to shoot a couple pocket holes in the shelf support. Once my shelf is in place, I use some 1-inch pocket hole screws to screw it tight. With another scrap piece of 3/4 inch maple plywood, I make a mounting board for the back of the vanity. For the false drawer front, I select a really nice piece of character hickory lumber. I route it down at the router table with a 3/4 inch roundover bit on all the edges. I will use 4 screws from the back side of the vanity to hold the false front in place. I pre-drill the holes before screwing them in. With a couple of clamps, I hold the face in place and screw it in from the back with 4 1-inch screws. Now, moving on to making the door. I cut down some 3/4 inch rustic hickory stock to 2 inches wide for my stiles and my rails. At the router table, I cut the profile in my stiles and rails. Since I'm only doing a flat panel door, it's really easy to do with a simple router table. Once the stiles and rails are cut to size and have the profile in them, I switch bits and run the end profile in the rails. With my 1/4 inch MDF panel in place, I use a little bit of tight bond glue and some clamps, and I clamp the stiles and rails together. With a smaller router table, flat panel doors are really easy to make with just a couple inexpensive bits. Once I sanded the cabinet down and used a tack cloth to clean off most of the dust, I used an air hose to blow off any remaining dust. I used my HVLP sprayer and some pre-cat lacquer from Sherwin-Williams to finish this off. The last step in the vanity project is to add the door. I use my Craig hinge jig to drill the holes for the concealed Blum hinges that I'll be using. This is a really simple project when you use the Craig jig. When I drilled my hole in the door for the hinge, I set my jig at 2.5 inches. I know my door needs a 1/2 inch overhang all the way around, so I drill a hole 2 inches down from the face frame and center in the stile. This is where my hinge will mount to the stile.
We finished up with the bathroom vanity today. Turned out really good. It's a really good beginner's project if you want to get into cabinet building or furniture building or anything like that. Most of the tools I used, if you have a hobby shop, you probably have the same ones besides a panel saw. But you can use a table saw just the same as a panel saw. Works just as good, cuts just as accurate. These are great projects to do. You can even have somebody else build your doors if you're not comfortable with building doors, but it's not a real hard project as I showed you in the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the work we do. If you do, please click down below and subscribe to our channel. Also check us out on Instagram at Bay Ridge DIY. We do post some videos to there. We give a lot of tips and tricks on there too. So hope you enjoyed our video and stick around. We'll have some more coming. Have a good one.